Una furtiva lagrima negli occhi suoi spunto.
Welcome to ToBeSeen.com. My name's Joe Dove, and I am the host of Disc Dungeon, the music section of ToBeSeen.com. I'm excited to present to the site today Stephano Andreotti. So, Stephano, I've got to ask, what brought you to the genre of opera?
Ever since I was young, since I was 2, in fact, I always wanted to be a vocal performer. And in my teen years, when my voice was finally starting to develop, I had made the acquaintance and later friendship of my teacher of 10 years, well, my teacher of 13 years, actually, now. That time flies by. Kelly Nassif. She's a world-renowned opera singer herself who's traveled the world, God, at least 3 times. She primarily has helped me hone my voice into the lighter, high-voiced tenor that it is today. I fell in love with the genre of opera actually a little later in my life when I started to get very spiritual in a different way. I started seeing how opera connected with so many intricate facets of life, both from an emotional and metaphysical perspective, but also from a mathematical and scientific one.
How long would you say it took you to achieve this level of expertise?
So like I said, I've been singing all my life. I've been performing for as long as I can remember, but I did not start diving into heavy voice training until 13 years ago. And I'd worked with a few voice teachers. I worked with Michael Kelly, I worked with Eric Rieger, but I primarily did my work with Kelly Nassif. She has really drilled a lot of wonderful habits into me, one of them being the heavy practice regimen and being able to drill and dissect a piece little by little, note by note, and how it relates, all-encompassing to the music. Honestly, man, like you practice at least an hour a day, 6 days a week. At least give yourself one day to rest. As another wonderful teacher, Margaret Cusack, told me when I was at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, if you're doing this only 3 or 4 times a week, 3 or 4 times, maybe it's just a hobby for you.
Oh, I can tell from what I've experienced hearing you sing at the event that I saw in New Jersey, this is not a hobby for you.
Thank you.
I've got to say, well practiced, well maintained. You've mastered the art there. Wondered, have you ever participated in a full opera before?
Yes, I have a few, actually. Susanna by Carlisle Floyd, Dido and Aeneas. I've done the full Beauty and the Beast opera. I was the main role there. I was the Beast in the opera, which is much more over the top than the Disney version of the story. Also, the role is a tenor as opposed to a bass baritone. Now, for those of you at home, a tenor is the high male voice. It's what people usually think of when they think of male singers nowadays. It's usually more showcased in modern pop and musical theater, where the bass baritone voice is the lower, more darker, robust sort of sound. Usually what comes to mind is you think like the voice of God in movies and cartoons.
So Morgan Freeman.
Essentially, yeah.
So, seeing that you've done more than just opera, what other genres do you partake in?
Yes, so I love traditional pop songs, so essentially anything that's like a pre-1970. Not that I don't like anything past the 70s, it's just that the sound and the depth of the music hits me in a different way, and I also believe it's more straightforward and aligns with voice technique. I do jazz. I do, let me think, little bits of rock and roll. I'm a big Three Dog Night fan. I always like Three Dog Night. I do musical theater. I've done a lot of regional theater. I've done Tony from West Side Story like 5 times. I've done Jekyll and Hyde. I do Jesus Christ Superstar, hence the hair, right?
That's fun. That's a staple at my family, having Jesus Christ Superstar around Easter.
Really?
Maybe we'll get you to come to my mother's nursing home, give her a treat.
That would be wonderful. I so look forward to that.
Yeah. What exactly would you say is your biggest influence? What other artists and musical genres would you say brought you to the point that you are today?
So, there's so many.
Yeah.
Because I think people always say, "Oh, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite type of music. I think I have a favorite song with each genre, but I don't think they're necessarily comparable because artists are different. But I actually got my start with Barry Manilow. I always loved him. Certain people dismiss his work because I believe they don't understand some of the depth that surrounds it. He actually combines a lot of German Romantic style from the German Romantic period with a lot of jazz idiosyncrasies and a little bit of the pop that was popular during the 60s. And I believe that created a very rich sound that was very similar to the early crooner bands and orchestras, and also even like Disney's Alan Menken. So when you think of the soundtracks from like Hercules or Beauty and the Beast or The Little Mermaid, that's Alan Menken, who was a genius composer. So that was definitely a huge influence on me. I love Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole really was my first person to dive me into all sorts of different styles of jazz, because people, when they think jazz, they think a big umbrella term, but there's so many different types. Musical theater was always a big thing for me because it was certainly a different type of stage performance that was this sort of quasi between pop song and opera. It's definitely a little bit easier to sing when you were younger. The true peak for a voice in opera is like late 20s, like mid 30s, and then your voice changes in your 40s, but you have to make sure you're keeping up with it. Otherwise, if your voice blows out, like, that's it. So that's kind of been a lot of my influence from a musical standpoint. And from a spiritual standpoint, I study all sorts of cultures. I study all sorts of people and backgrounds. Each thing that I have listened to evokes so many different types of feelings, thoughts. I have what's called synesthesia. I believe everyone has it to a point. I think it's just a matter of discovering it, which essentially you listen to music and sounds, and they give you ideas. They give you scenery, colors, times of day, seasons, and stuff like that. And that really makes the creative process much more of a personal thing to me. And when I really truly discovered how opera played with that and how classical music in general played with that, I fell in love, and I was determined to really connect a lot of different ideas, if that answers your question.
I just want to get into the story of how I met Stephano. So, as you know, I'm a big sucker for music. I love music. I usually get into like rock and, even sometimes hip hop, but I really appreciate classical. And I actually went to a wrestling event, and, this amazing voice introduces one of the key players to the show. And I said to myself, wow. And then I get a text from my wife, and she said, wow, you've got to ask him if he can come on TubiScene.com. And sure enough, we were lucky enough to grab him. And just tell me, how did you end up in wrestling of all places?
I actually used to wrestle for a couple of years. I got my start with wrestling with Fight the World Wrestling. Earl Cooter and Jack Gallo gave me my start. I met a lot of great people there, a lot of lasting friends. I've wrestled for ICW, CZW Dojo Wars. I've had a decent amount of fun in the time. I think wrestling is one of the most underrated forms of method acting and improvisation, mixed with probably the most grueling athleticism and taxing on the body. I'm a martial artist outside of wrestling. I love to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai kickboxing. I compete in that whenever it is I can, but primarily Jiu-Jitsu. I try not to get hit in the face whenever possible. I loved wrestling, and it's just like any other art, has the exact same ways of thinking. I always fell in love with it, and I stayed in contact with a lot of people, with Matthew Ryan and Harry Trijarian.
Yeah, Trijarian.
Yes.
Yeah.
I apologize if I'm butchering your name, friend.
I do it too, so.
One of the owners of Capital Wrestling, they called me up. They said, "Do you want to work with the All-Father Darius Carter?" Really, really, really awesome, talented wrestler, and they said, "Oh, pick an opera song to sing." So I felt that nothing would be more appropriate than probably the most known tenor aria of all time from Luciano Pavarotti, singing Puccini's Nessun Dorma from Turandot. Even though I'm a bit young, everyone goes crazy for that one. Vincero, right? So
right. Excellent. Again, thank you so much, Stephano. I'm going to hand the mic over to Stephano so he can present the song that he's lent to TubiScene.com as a debut song. And we are excited to have you back on the site to sing other songs and in other genres. So thank you again, Stephano, and please.
Thank you so much, Joe. So this particular song that you're about to see is called Una Furtiva Lagrima. It is from L'Esira d'Amore, and it is by the composer Donizetti. This particular song, what's going on in this aria, in context of the entire show. L'Esira d'Amore is Italian for the elixir of love. Essentially, the main character who is singing this particular song is in love with this beautiful girl. The setting is Italy, typical romantic setting that people think of. And he's incredibly in love with her, but she's spurring his advances, but she's also playing hard to get. He visits the local snake oil salesman, and he comes across this love potion. It's just wine, but the snake oil salesman doesn't tell him that. So he drinks a whole bottle of wine. All sorts of women in the town start to flock to him, and it's stroking his ego. But then he sees in the distance this woman, the woman that he loves, and she's crying, but she's holding it in. She's being furtive about it. Una furtiva lagrima translates to a furtive tear. And it's at this moment in the show, the biggest transition period, where he sees the depth in love, where I think he realizes that this is the only true time that he must have loved her in the first place. Sees the deep emotion. He realizes that she loves him, he loves her. What more could he want? This beautiful dichotomy between the pain of not wanting his lover to suffer anymore, but feeling this exhilaration. So I hope you're going to like it. It's one of the few songs that I've had the privilege to perform in many different venues. I hope the recording does it all justice. Thank you all so much, and thank you, Joe.
Una furtiva